Let's check in on the Young Turks. Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur had quite the back and forth during a recent show. And as I'm sure you've heard about, this progressive network, as it's coined, has been going through a lot of... They've been hitting a lot of obstacles and a lot of change has been going on. Some people are describing it as a rightward shift. I think Anna Kasparian would probably admit, yeah, maybe a little bit more to the right, whereas Cenk Uygur probably just would describe it as a new open-mindedness to MAGA. And I'll give my criticisms. They're different for Cenk Uygur versus Anna Kasparian. But regardless, there's a lot of chaos in the story about the Young Turks lately, including Cenk Uygur going to a right-wing political conference, and I'll address that as well. But here's Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian talking about the future of Vice President Kamala Harris politically, and it leads to Anna Kasparian saying she'll quit, TYT, if the thing that Cenk Uygur outlines happens. While you watch this, if you appreciate this show, I'd appreciate you clicking the subscribe button.
I think Kamala Harris will probably win in a cakewalk for governor.
No!
Okay.
No! What are you doing? What are you doing?
No, I'm telling you the reality, whether you like it or not.
What are you doing?
Democratic voters in California love to obey. And so...
Oh my God. I'm going to move, Cenk. I'm going to quit my job.
I got you.
I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to move.
I'm not saying I'm in favor of it. I'm telling you what's... Like if the Democratic Party said, we anoint Kamala Harris, a giant percentage of Democrats in California would go, yes, we obey. We will take the loyalty oath. It doesn't matter how bad she is.
This state cannot survive another incompetent Democrat leading it.
Leading it. Democrat like Kamala.
No, we just can't. Okay, anyway, so people are egging her on. Okay, apparently she's in a wait and see mode. How about you wait and see your way out of public life and go do what you're supposed to do. Go work in the private sector, go do the lobbying thing, whatever it is, but do not run as governor of California. Yeah. Do not.
Okay, so saying that she'll quit if Vice President Harris becomes the governor of California, and just the way that they're speaking about that, I find a lot wrong with. There are plenty of fair criticisms of both Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris. But as I tune into the Young Turks, and I haven't done it in a while, but there were times in the past where I would more frequently, there seems to be a reoccurring problem with, and I know they would dispute this, but it's definitely what's going on, with false equivalencies between the two sides and overstating the flaws of Democrats that don't pass their exact litmus test. I don't think Vice President Harris would be a disaster as a governor of California. I just don't. I don't think her time as DA, Attorney General, Senator, and then Vice President demonstrates someone who would horribly govern California as a governor. But there's a sense that if they're categorized as establishment, necessarily that must be the outcome. And I get why, Kamala Harris would be an establishment Democrat. She's definitely a part of the establishment. And there are a bunch of criticisms of the establishment, right and left, but not equal in magnitude. And also, you can both, and we'll get into this a little bit later with something that Cenk brought up in an argument with someone on X, but you can point to the broken campaign financing of our elections and how way too much emphasis or power is given to special interests, powerful, wealthy folks, because they can contribute so much more. And that is a flaw in our system. Without pretending like that, as you perceive it to be loosely corruption, as Cenk Uygur describes it, places Kamala Harris, which he seemed to try to do, in a similar category because she raised a lot of money from powerful folks and wealthy folks, as a corrupt individual like Donald Trump. But let's get into that a little bit later. First, checking in on this this Turning Point USA event, which is very MAGA, and Cenk Uygur showed up at it, not to say he's MAGA, but to share his views, and I'll talk about what I think is wrong with this. He said, I'm genuinely curious to see if folks on the left feel this is outrageous. I go to talk to MAGA, they boo Mitch McConnell and Dick Cheney. On what planet is that a bad thing? Then I talk about how progressives have always wanted to overthrow our establishment too. How is that bad? Here's why it's bad. The anti-establishment movement within the Republican Party, being MAGA, is worse than the establishment of the Republican Party. The establishment of the Republican Party, what used to be your mainstream Republicans, is bad. MAGA is worse. So celebrating them for rejecting something bad for something worse is a part of the problem, Cenk. It's giving your liberal or left-wing or progressive, as you've labeled yourself, credibility to a MAGA premise that is completely flawed. I'd rather have a completely horrible on policy, horrible in the money they take from huge special interests, horrible in just about every political value they have, individual, which represents much of your old guard GOP, but someone who at least participates in the most basic tenets of our democratic system, who doesn't think it's awesome to target media outlets, etc. With those people, a democracy can function. Not like I'd like it to, but it can. With some of these extreme MAGA folks, we're starting to see how it can really become existentially disastrous.
And what I mean by that is not a revolution against the Democratic Party or the left or the country, but a revolution against the establishment. So I knew you guys were for real in fighting against the establishment when I started going on right-wing shows and I would say something negative about Mitch McConnell. And when I did that in the past, what I would get back is, oh, no, Mitch McConnell's great. Pelosi's terrible, but Mitch McConnell's great.
Let's do that here. What do you guys think of Mitch McConnell?
All right.
Just a test.
Yes, I love that. So look, for my left-wing friends that are watching out there, they just booed Mitch McConnell. That's a great thing, okay? And let's do one more. What do you guys think about Dick Cheney? My left-wing friends out there, we have been waiting for the right-wing.
Yeah, okay, I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing where he's going wrong. Just to be clear, everyone's going to call him a grifter. Everyone's going to call Anna Kasparian a grifter. The shift from Anna Kasparian to me is more outrageous than Cenk's. But Cenk seems to be... But with either of them, y'all know I don't like speculating unless there's just so much overwhelming evidence about the intentions. I want to assume that they're coming at this in good faith and could be doing things completely wrong from that approach. But I'm pretty certain this is genuine from Cenk. It's not some grift because he thinks it's going to help because this has been really disastrous for TYT. But instead, a profound misunderstanding of MAGA. Was this caused because he got too obsessed, as I've told you before, with that 1% of everyone's audience who will say things at you that are really upsetting? And if you get just obsessed on them, you'll think your whole audience is more irrational than they are. And so he spun himself the other direction? Maybe. I don't know where this is coming from. We're all trying our best to process Trump's win and then proceed accordingly, the best that we can. Some people, it has broken their brains, though. And I say with love, it is insane. It is. To sit on a stage and as much work as Cenk Uygur has done in this space, and I don't want us to just throw that all in the trash can because he's being a little ridiculous here. But as much time to not have learned that sitting on a stage and accepting the premise that the reason MAGA rejected Mitch McConnell, the reason they rejected Dick Cheney, the reason they rejected Liz Cheney is because of an understanding of what was broken with the old guard GOP and an intention in rejecting it for the better. When so obviously, if you chart the course of someone being in the good graces of MAGA and then them not, it always happens to coincide when on a personal level they wrong Trump. Not on policy, but on a personal level. And then, what is one of the defining characteristics of the establishment? It is too much in the interest of the elites, right? Wealthy, powerful folks with lots of influence. They're being served too much, too often by powerful politicians. I think we can all accept that. You are misleading that crowd, and you're misleading a lot of people, pretending like there's any rationality to saying Trump, who did one of the biggest wealth transfers to the wealthy, is the warrior for the working class. Trump, who was horrible in his policies directed towards labor, is the hero of the working class. And so while I'll work with someone who I think is terrible, I'm willing to work with someone who has terrible values, a lot of things, to do a good thing. Like if some of the MAGA politicians say that they want to ban congressional stock trading, if I were in Congress and they wanted to co-sign on a bill and get that done, I'd do it while rejecting their other values. Because that's something I want to get done. If that's how we do it, let's do it. But to go and present yourself as a voice of the left, and in a sense, even though I know Cenk adds caveats and gives his stance that's not the same as the crowd, in a sense, it's you endorsing their premise, which is all flawed. Because it's choosing someone more extreme, anti-democratic, and authoritarian than the establishment, which is worse. How about you choose someone who really does want to fix the system in our interest, but doesn't think a part of that is terminating the Constitution, for example? Here's more.
On the right, you guys do a great job of coalescing, okay? So you do a couple of things well. You work together well, and you're more welcoming, if I'm being honest.
We're glad Cenk's here, right, everybody?
And a lot of people on the left know this as well. If you agree with MAGA 5%, the answer you get is welcome, right? Come join us, right? On the left, if you disagree 5%, they go, get out of here, you're a right-winger, you're a fascist, right? But if you push enough people out and you guys welcome enough people in, eventually you win the popular vote. That's what I warned them about, and that's what happened, right? So, look, I propose simple rules, the 3 rules of the internet. Rule number 1, when we disagree, we fight. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Now, rule number 2 is afterwards we must have a beer together, okay? And rule number 3 is, for God's sake, when we agree, let's unite. So, for the left, we have too much division. We almost never unify. I don't mean with the right, I mean internally. The left loves to attack one another. I love you guys on the left. I love you. But every once in a while, when we get a yes, when we agree, can we please unite? And the second thing we need is for the old, I'm being honest, and on average, not everyone, of course, but for the older Democratic voters, please turn off your television sets. They're lying to you.
Okay. So again, a lot of people will even be upset with me and will say very mean things to me in the comments or in DMs when I specify this. I need all of you to know that my stance currently, from what I'm observing, and this is not occupying a huge part of my time, so I'm not saying I've watched a bunch of TYT to know exactly what's going on. I might have missed things. But from some of the clips that are going viral and some of the coverage that I have seen, something very notable is taking place. And I think Cenk Uygur is misleading himself or has been misled or has a misconception about MAGA. But I think this is a good faith attempt at the wrong goal. And what could be a harmful goal, no doubt. And before giving more on that, actually, before going on to this last thing, which is him going back and forth with friend of the show, Aaron Rupar, I do hear what he's saying about the left eating itself alive. And this happens where, I don't want to give another example, but there's been things recently that I'll do, whether it's going on other people's shows to debate people, or bring in someone on my show to debate them. And we'll get all this negative feedback. And why, anytime we try anything new or I try to do anything, there's a big chunk, it feels like, maybe it's a small chunk, but they're very loud, of the audience who gets really upset. I'm unsubscribing and this is terrible. And the feeling is, why foster an environment where you're so afraid to try new things, to speak to different people, as long as you're always standing true on your values? And I'd hope, if you've been watching the show any amount of time, you know, first and foremost, I'm going to uphold the values I stand by. And then a part of that's going to be exploring different ideas and talking to different people and putting myself in uncomfortable situations and giving takes on things that are nuanced and difficult and I might not exactly nail the explanation of. But a lot of people are so quick to hate on you for doing such things. And so what happens is the litmus test left and the keyboard warriors, let's say, will create a perception that we're less united than I actually think we are on core things. When we talk about the pro-democracy movement, I think there's a real unity to the core values. But good news is no news in this biz. And so that gets lost, and the little areas where we disagree get blown up. And then anytime I have a slight disagreement with somebody who identifies as liberal, they make it a point to repetitively tell me that I'm a fraud. And I know it's the same for other people in the space. And luckily, producer Jaden helps to filter some of that as he reads all of our feedback and then gives me the more, succinct version. And we have a really amazing community here that is much more fun than most I know to interact with. But that can make a lot of people go, all right, whatever, I don't really. Or it can get them to run in the wrong direction. So let's be compassionate, let's engage with people, and they can upset you, but as long as you know the core dedication to our democratic principles, to common sense, basic fundamental priorities, as long as you know that those are there, let's not pretend like they're the enemy all of a sudden, because we do need a coalition to win. But that point standing alone can be true. And the way that Cenk is going about, quote unquote, uniting on things with MAGA is creating a really dangerous misconception for a lot of people. Because think about someone who sort of doesn't know exactly where they stand, and the dangerousness of the MAGA ideology gets abstracted when you hear what Cenk is saying. Even though he's spent a lot of his career being clear about the, red alert, the danger of Trump and the MAGA ideology. But this type of language he's doing, it does make you go, so they're better than Liz Cheney? But Liz Cheney doesn't think we should overthrow elections. And it makes people believe that the supporters of Trump are supporting Trump for the right reasons. And they don't like Cheney, for example, because of the bad policies that we perceive. That's not what's really going on now. There is a genuine backlash to power, to establishment, folks, that Trump has weaponized for terrible outcomes and misled people. It's sort of a fake populism he does. And I know Cenk has said that, but you actually play into that by doing what Cenk is doing, in my opinion. And Trump being so pro the power, influence, and wealth, and wanting to enhance that and not the well-being of working class people, proves that you can't accept the premise of MAGA that this is about a genuine outrage of income inequality or something, as our rejection of some of the Democratic leaders is. And Rupar said, you cannot find common cause. Oh, well, first let me read what Cenk Uygur said. We talked about some of our agreements and disagreements, and I did get booed at least once. But what's most important is how much we agree on core issues like corruption and war. You have to give credit to MAGA for wanting to have a conversation and being really welcoming. Aaron Rupar said, you cannot find common cause on core issues like corruption with supporters of Trump, who is far and away the most corrupt president in history and isn't even pretending to divest from his business this time around. Come on. It's a brilliant point. And Cenk responded to that by saying something I thought I had prepared. I did. Okay. You and I voted for Kamala Harris, Cenk Uygur responds to Aaron Rupar, who bragged about raising billions largely from corporate donors. She then bragged about how 90 corporate CEOs wrote a letter saying how she was in their back pocket. So we're talking about corruption. I hate corruption on both sides. Do you? And that's what I referenced earlier. This is false equivalency in a nauseating fashion. Our current system almost necessitates massive fundraising, often from very wealthy organizations and individuals. For Kamala Harris to engage in that system, a system that I find completely flawed, is so different than Trump benefiting himself financially and wielding governmental power to do so, not to mention his corrupt acts as it pertains to our democracy. What I'll bring it back to always. Yes, we have a broken system. Harris realized, as is an obvious fact of life, that you kind of have to participate in that in a presidential election. It's a bummer, but you do. And it's a reminder of how we should be working hard to change the system by electing people who are dedicated to doing that. But not let's just sit on our behinds and surrender because we're not willing to participate. And when making such a false equivalency, you portray an idea that Harris would have been equal to, or I know he would not argue this because I know he voted for Harris and I know he despises Trump, but there's a certain level of dishonesty to looking at the Harris agenda versus the Trump agenda and not going clearly the money she was raising, as shown by Biden raising a lot of money from those same people and him doing a lot of pro-working class things. Harris's agenda clearly was so much more pro-working class. And I'm always going to want more. But it was solid compared to the other guy. And she was a part of an administration, President Joe Biden's, which was one of the best in its pro-working class policies that we've seen in quite some time. And that all gets abstracted when you watch TYT lately. I'm just being honest. And that's what I think a lot of Cenk Uygur's rhetoric is distracting from. And when you convince people that, yeah, I guess there's a better side, but it all just sort of sucks, when that's not the fact of life. Both deeply flawed. One, a lot of opportunity to make a lot of progress, as we've seen. But whenever you do the they're both terrible, who cares thing, falsely, you convince people to disengage in a really harmful way. Lots of thoughts I know you have. Share them with me. Even if you're a keyboard warrior, even if you're going to be mean, you can in the comments. Support the show by getting that members only bonus show by clicking the join button below.